Well, hello. It's a pleasure to present today Professor Kowalkowski. Christian is Professor of Industrial Marketing at Linköping University in Sweden, and also he's research fellow at Hanken Business School of Economics in Helsinki, Finland. He has established himself as a leading scholar in the fields of service strategy and implementation, and he's a frequent presenter in academic conferences, industry workshops, etc. Professor Kowalkowski's work focuses on service growth strategy and solutions marketing, also service innovation, subscription business models, and he has published in many relevant journals. One of them is Journal of Service Research, Industrial Marketing Management, JBIM, Journal of Business Industrial Marketing as well, Journal of Business Research, etc. And he's associate editor of the Journal of Service Management and also of the Journal of Service Marketing. He's also in the advisory board of other journals such as Industrial Marketing Management, Journal of Business Research, etc. And the Journal of Service Theory and Practice. And today we are lucky because we will have a presentation and also a discussion hopefully. And the topic is putting the service into B2B marketing, key developments in service research and the relevance for B2B. So please, Christian, start.
Thank you so much, Jose. Thank you so much for that kind introduction. I hope you can all hear me and see me. And I'm very grateful and honored to be here and to deliver one of the keynotes of CBIM. And I think it's wonderful to see so many participants online. And it's also great, I think, to hear from Michel about the progress of JBIM and what I think is a bright future for the journal. And I actually have very fond memories of attending CBIM conferences in the past, meeting great scholars, making friends, building networks. I think the first one was the joint CBIM ISBM conference in Tampa in 2008. And then the next year, I attended the CBIM workshop in Atlanta and several others over the years. This year, I'm unable to attend the entire conference as I'm spending a week in the Swedish countryside, but hopefully the 4G reception will be adequate for this hour here. I certainly hope so. And as Jose in his introduction explained, my research is at the intersection of B2B marketing and service management, primarily servitization. So when I was asked about this keynote, I thought first about talking something about that, but then I teamed up with Jochen Wirtz, who is one of the really big names in service marketing, professor at the National University of Singapore. And we try to identify how service marketing may inform B2B marketing in general. And this is actually based on a forthcoming paper we have in JBIM that will hopefully appear online during summer. And I thought that this will hopefully be interesting for all of you, or most of you, providing some food for thought and stimulate the debate and research in this area. And before starting, I just also want to thank all the experts who have provided input to this paper. It includes Michel, Judy, Jona, and I think a couple of others perhaps who are actually attending the conference, and also several others. So what I would like to talk to you about today is let's see here, something happened with, okay, there we go. Okay, so the technology is working, I hope. So 4 broad and related themes from service literature that I hope can stimulate B2B research even further. First, capturing value in modern service economies, then the servitization of B2B offerings, which is of course area very relevant to me, but also looking at the productization of such offerings. Then strategic pathways towards cost-effective service excellence, and finally, intelligent automation, service robots, and the role of AI. when talking about, well, services, we often hear that we live in a service economy and so on, and typically this has very clear B2C connotations. Many people would think about tourism and restaurants and such sectors. But as we all know, service is really a key growth engine in B2B industries as well. And in fact, B2B services are the fastest growing segments in the world economy. We have consulting, logistics, operation services, business process outsourcing, financial services, and many other. So it's not really the expanding B2C service sector that explains most of the growth, but it's actually B2B. And what is also helping this, of course, is the transformation of manufacturing and the related outsourcing of activities from pure manufacturers to professional service companies. That, of course, then also shifts the activities from manufacturing companies to service providers, which also explains a lot of this growth. And now, of course, we see further acceleration due to digital transformation. So some of the motivation behind this and why I make this case is that much of the research in B2B, well, just as marketing traditionally has focused on goods, B2B is also largely concentrated on manufacturing companies due to its product-centric connotations and origins. And we know that traditional manufacturers are increasingly pursuing servitization as a growth strategy, and that servitization is indeed one of the most active domains these days in B2B marketing. But I still believe that there is a need to further develop general theory on B2B services, which is not only limited to manufacturing settings. So we're also seeing that traditional boundaries between manufacturing and service are increasingly blurred. And today, very often manufacturers and service providers may compete for the same customers with different types of innovative services. So I believe that, well, we can integrate insights from service marketing to enrich B2B research, thereby providing new perspectives on how companies can position themselves to better capture value, to more successfully servitize their offerings, achieve cost-effective service excellence, and also to deploy intelligent automation and other technologies. And as I said, focus on services in manufacturing is not new. There are a lot of sort of best practice and cases we like to use when we teach and when we talk to managers and executives. One is, of course, IBM, that has successfully developed a service business advertisement for the extraordinary computing system. They moved into personal computers, portable computers, although we're quite glad today that portable computers have developed further, I guess. My first and only IBM computer actually looked very much like this one, although this is a Lenovo. So by then, IBM sold most of their remaining hardware business to Lenovo of China and has since then moved to cognitive computing and other service-related growth areas. In fact, a couple of years ago, IBM director Jim Spoorer wrote a nice sort of summary of IBM's service journey and showing also the tremendous service transformation that the company has undertaken since the early 1980s. But as is the case in many of these cases, I think it's useful to also broaden the perspective and look at industry life cycles and dynamics over a longer time periods even. So if we look back at the very origin of IBM, if we go to 1911 and onwards, the business then was not digital, of course, but it was about keypads and tabulators. But nonetheless, already then, services were very important for the company. So this is an ad from 1949, IBM means service. And if we look at the sales, we can actually see that it's really service and rental that drives the business. So by 1940, service and rental is almost 3 times as large as new product sales. And we can see the tremendous growth throughout the 1930s. But as I said, today, service growth has accelerated even further. So I will briefly touch upon these 4 themes and also outline some research areas for these 4 themes that I hope may stimulate further research on the topic. But before starting, just a definition. What do I mean by service? And I think there are as many definitions of service as there are service researchers. But my definition would be something along these lines, that it's about the application of specialized knowledge and skills through deeds, processes, and performances to bring about desired results in a customer's assets, activities, and processes, or in customers themselves, such as through training or executive education. And the first theme relates to the fact that services play a more important role. And the outsourcing of service activities, as I said, has resulted in an ever-increasing specialization of our economies. What used to be a sometimes quite neglected support activity within a manufacturing company suddenly has become the management focus and core competence of a specialized service provider. But we also know that the decrease of manufacturing's share of GDP also reflects the lowering price of goods relative to services. We can, for example, compare the price of a TV set today as compared to the 1960s, and compare one night, the cost of one night in a hospital today to the 1960s. And there is a tremendous difference here in how the costs have evolved. And as Hill already in 1977 pointed out, even for identical output, the very same activity can actually be classified as good or service depending on the responsibilities of the firm who is actually responsible for the production process. And I will talk also about servitization, and this term was coined in 1988 by Vandermeer and Rada. And they do not limit it to manufacturing. They talk about servitization of business in a very broad sense, also including pure service providers, and say that, well, essentially all companies are in the service business. And what we will see is growing importance of combining products and services, knowledge, software into various solutions with services in the lead role. So I would say, regardless of how we classify services and so on, they do play an increasingly strategic role for value creation and competitive advantage. And the question is then how to better create and also capture value. And service literature has identified a number of key assets that can enhance a firm's competitive advantage and financial viability. I will not go through all of this in detail, but just touch briefly upon the different market-based, resource-based, and platform-based assets that companies have at hand, and what I believe deserves some more research attention when it comes to B2B. So when it comes to market-based assets, we have such things as reputation and brand image, which is quite well researched on the consumer side, but not so much in B2B. And this ranges from powerful B2B brands. It could be Oracle, McKinsey, Goldman Sachs, ABB, and many others, to personal brands of key individuals such as salespeople and star opinion leaders in particular industries. That can be very influential. And if a key salesperson leaves a company and moves to another one, that person may very well take many of the strategic customers with them. So more research on this, I think, would be very intriguing. We also see, and we know that, in many companies operate in quite complex supply chains and marketing channels, and they may have limited control of customer touch points and of the overall customer experience, as they are dependent on dealers, distributors, resellers, and other intermediaries, which means that the customer relationship may be weakened, and there are difficulties also of obtaining customer data, as intermediaries may jealously protect those relationships and also be unwilling for the data sharing to be established. So I do think that more research also is needed on how to take sort of control of these relationships, of the overall customer experience, and to mitigate the risks this involves. When it comes to resources, we know that equipment more and more is turning into smart digital devices, equipment that previously was seen as sometimes dumb pieces of iron, as some people would call it. And this, of course, makes the distinction between static and dynamic resources increasingly blurred. And we also know that many companies, and I would say any type of organization, for them a key issue is how to hire and keep employees with necessary digital skills. This has really become paramount regardless of what company we are talking about. And research, I think, can even more investigate how firms can not just work with these HR-related issues, but also how to monetize data and analytics by integrating a wide range of different heterogeneous resources. Then we also have the platform-based assets, and there's been a rapidly growing stream of literature on the consumer side looking at platforms, Amazon, Facebook, and many others. But we know that also B2B firms are strategically investing in platforms. For example, we have platforms that can either serve as intermediaries for direct exchange or as an architecture upon which other firms develop complementary innovation. So in the first case, we have companies such as US-based Vixo, which is a platform-based business model that connects asset owners, such as we can take fast food outlets of a global chain, with vetted local service providers, such as local plumbers or pest control companies. And the firm maintains over 2 million assets for clients in a wide range of industries. And when it comes to complementers, I think IBM's Watson is a good case in point, with a chatbot technology on which many digital agents are built, also from third parties. So I think we need to better understand how to adopt digital service platforms for the purpose of value co-creation in these complex and dynamic B2B settings, which leaves us with a number of promising research areas that I've already touched upon here, but how to find the right balance between different types of assets, what are the ownership strategies, the moderators, mediators, boundary conditions, what are the potential constellation of assets, both internal one and external ones that companies can extend from complementers and other partners in the ecosystem, and different, of course, roles of different types of platforms and data, because not all platforms are the same. Then, of course, we have the second theme, the servitization, but also of offerings, but also their productization. And clearly, a service-centric business model, I would say, generally differ from a product-centric, more transaction-based one, by assuming a greater responsibility for the customer's overall value creation process. And there are a lot of different reasons why companies servitize. But on an aggregated level, I would say there are two fundamental ones. So the first is to really see this as a defensive stance, to protect or enhance the existing core product business. So not very service-centric, if you like, but still about protecting the core. Whereas the second one is more proactive, helping to improve the processes and capabilities of customers, also acquiring new customers, and building a new service business, even at the expense of the legacy product business. So here we see many tensions internally in companies, as this may actually cannibalize the traditional core business. So what is then servitization? And again, this is a term where we see so many different definitions. A related term is service infusion, which is fairly common in marketing, which I see as really increasing the service business orientation of a company. And this, if we use Holmberg's operationalization, this is a three-dimensional construct. It's about the number of services, the number of customers who are being offered the services, and also the relative emphasis placed on services as compared to products. And I would say that servitization goes beyond service infusion and just sort of building the service portfolio, because it also entails changes to the business model and the business logic of the company. So it's about new mental models, change management, culture and leadership, and those issues that are also missing in general business model literature and conceptualization. So to me, at least, the definition would be the transformational process whereby a company, or of course it could also be a business unit, shifts from a product-centric to service-centric business model and business logic. And this is nothing new, the trend towards more advanced services, to integrated customer solutions, where revenue mechanisms are based to various extent on outcomes, performance, availability, and so forth. But there is, I believe, also a large growth potential in the downscaling of these more customized offerings, because not all customers are interested in buying solutions. I remember a long time ago, a colleague and we wrote a paper on solutions, and one of the quotes we used there is from a manager at Ericsson saying that, well, it's nice to hear that you have a total solution that you want to sell, but I'm afraid we don't have a total problem. So many customers are not interested in these solutions, but in more well-defined services. And of course, the cost to serve and provide these customized services and solutions is also high. We have higher operational and strategic risks associated with solution provision. So therefore, a lot of potential lies in how to promote repeatability and scalability and being able to modularize the services to target a larger and more heterogeneous customer base. So therefore, the concept of productization becomes even more important, because services may not be fixed already, even when they reach the sales stage, as opposed to products. The first version that is being launched on a market may more resemble that of a prototype, oftentimes without having a clear pricing model or a sales approach. It's very much about trial and error. And of course, local adaptations may also be needed. We have such things as national data regulation, but also changing customer value perceptions over time that influences how the service evolves. So oftentimes the service becomes formalized only after it has been sold and delivered and used in the field one or multiple times. And this calls for productization. And research on productization identifies at least 3 key characteristics. The first one that's very important is specification, being able to have a formalized value proposition that is configured, standardized, and systematized. The second one relates to branding. What is the name, the term, the symbol, the design being used? Should it be the same as the company is using, or should it be perhaps some service-specific one? Different companies use different strategies here and tactics. And finally, pricing, of course, needing to have a clearly stated and communicated price, that it does not have to be negotiated or determined for each transaction. So in total, this gives us a toolbox, if you like, with different key productization approaches. This is based on a recent paper by Johan Wirtz, Elina Jakola, and Productize services. And I believe this is highly relevant in B2B settings. And this leaves us also with a number of research areas. What is really the effectiveness of these different tools, the specification, branding, and pricing of how to develop service products? How about applying marketing concepts from branding and from pricing that are more established in B2C, but in B2B settings? And of course, issues related to data sharing, ownership, governance, and affordances. Then the third theme I'd like to talk about is strategic pathways towards cost-effective service excellence. So what is cost-effective service excellence? Essentially, it's about achieving low unit cost, meaning high productivity, while at the same time delivering high and industry-leading level of service quality, so high service excellence. And there are a number of different strategic pathways to achieve this. Research has discussed this mainly in consumer settings. I will not go through all of this here, but briefly touch upon the operations management approach, which has most, I think, bearing on business to business. So essentially, it's about reducing customer-induced process variability, and it's a 3-step process. The first one is about isolating the technical core and shifting more activities from the front end to the back office. Second, Reducing customer choice, which may sound, of course, like a bad thing, but it may be the case that not all customers actually value all options, all variability, and of course all options. Also, the more options, the more this also costs. So managing this choice reduction in a feasible, sensible manner, and also reducing customer contact. And again, this can backfire, of course, is wrongly implemented. But if correctly implemented, it may provide a very efficient, reliable, and homogeneous service quality. So the question here is how to balance this with the need for customization, the right level of customer experience, and also the fostering of customer engagement, of course. So this, I believe, is a very relevant today and even more so in the future research area, how to implement this cost-effective service excellence for the mutual benefits for firms and their customers in B2B settings. And also many times this involves even more actors. We have service partners, distributors, and others who may also be involved in this value creation process. So what are really then the trade-offs at each of these steps in the customer journey? How can we apply these techniques in a sensible way that may actually strengthen the customer relationship rather than the other way around, which is clearly a risk if we want to automate too much and reduce the customer interaction. So customer engagement, experience, customer journeys, I think these are very relevant topics also to relate to when we talk about these issues. We also have issues such as data visualization, how to monitor and visualize these insights to the benefit of decision-making of different actors here. And finally, the fourth area is intelligent automation, service robots, and artificial intelligence. And again, I think this is really intriguing because we are seeing already now how intelligent automation is making inroads in many industries. And this most likely will result in more services becoming streamlined, standardized, modularized, and automated, also being delivered by more customer error tolerant and smart self-service technologies. And what we see is that much of the technology required for this intelligent automation, it could be chatbot solutions, digital agents, robots, etc., will not be produced in-house by each and every firm, but rather procured from large vendors that are operating globally and that are specialized in one or a couple of those technologies. So what happens then to the competition when the scalability and competitive intensity will increase? How should B2B firms then think about how to position themselves in this new environment when they are dependent on many external providers for these new technologies and the software? And evidently, we here too see more blurring industry boundaries and also new service ecosystems being formed as new technologies, continued specialization, and these new ecosystems clearly change the industry boundaries. Of course, this is nothing new. I think Apple is perhaps the best known example of what happened with when they entered the phone industry, that Nokia of Finland was dominating. We see what has happened in the music industry and so forth, but also in B2B industries where digitalization is further blurring industry boundaries. For example, Amazon Web Services moving into sensor-based industrial service provision and technology becoming an operant resource, a sort of an initiator or an actor in value creation. So competition increasingly comes from entrants outside the traditional industry boundaries. And these companies often have different culture, different mindsets, different skill sets, different assets and approaches to data and customer experience. And one question I think is really interesting is if the domain expertise and established customer relationships of established incumbent companies, will this be sufficient to keep these new data-driven and software-based competitors at bay, or will we see a larger type of disruption where these established companies will be outperformed by new entrants? Will we see instead perhaps new types of value constellations and collaborations? Also, a final issue here is investigating how the shift to more autonomous service systems will influence process variability. For example, we have seen with OM approaches focusing on reducing variability, but AI-based services are increasingly capable of adjusting to their environments, and also therefore they may be able to accommodate increased process variability. And the companies that know how to do this would then obviously have a competitive edge over others.
Can you hear me, Christian?
Yes, I can, Jose.
Okay, good question. How much time do you need? Because it would be great to have some time for discussion with the participants.
1 more minute.
Okay, fine, perfect. Thank you.
Is that okay? So I'm wrapping up. I'm sorry for taking the time here, but this is just wrapping up the 4th research theme. And I have mentioned much of this already, but I mean, implementation approaches, the commoditization of technology, emergence of new platforms and ecosystems, and new types of competition, I believe are very interesting areas here for B2B, as of course is the issue of data privacy and trust and the related ethical issues. So having said that, I would like to thank you all for listening, and I hope there is still some time for questions and discussion.
Perfect. I think we can have 10 minutes. Thanks a lot, Christian, for your interesting, inspiring presentation. And I will ask our colleagues, if you want to question or comment, please, instead of using the chat, it will be more direct. You can use a raise hand function. And you can get them, I think, give you the microphone, and then you can make a question to Christian. Who wants to start, please? Cecilia sent you a message. Thank you, Christian. It was interesting. Any question? You can raise your hand and use the microphone, please.
Either it was very clear or very confusing. I don't know.
Michael, Michael here. Okay. Hi, Michael.
Hi, hi, Christian. Thanks for the great talk. Just to continue the debate we had for the paper, because I was one of the respondents, you were asking about those trends. I was wondering, you made really great points about this productization. So where you mentioned, well, services have to become more efficient, if I understood it right, so the scalability of services and these kind of things. The question I have regarding this, I totally agree with the basics that there must be some branding, pricing must be clear, performance must be clear, and these kind of things. I just wonder, and maybe you can comment on this or maybe share your thoughts on this, are the manufacturing or the product marketing companies really the role models for this? So we know some service companies who have really found unique ways to do this, which are achieving perfectly what you are proposing, that we are seeing service as a routine. We don't even think about this. So I think about something, the most famous one is Google. So nobody of us thinks about Googling, yeah, so we use it as a standard tool, so this is pretty close to what we would consider as a kind of perfectly scaled up routine service. So, but if you look at what the marketing approach of Google is quite distant to what we know from manufacturing companies or from basic product companies. So, I think the challenge for service companies is there, and I think you describe it quite brilliantly, but my question is this productization, well, describing the challenge, but maybe a little bit misleading in what the service companies really need to scale up? Just as a starting point for the debate. We had it in the paper already, I know.
Yeah. Thank you, Michelle. That's an excellent comment, and I'll try just to explain questions here as well. Of course, I mean, it's not only a matter of productization, but since so much research focus has been on the exploration of new opportunities, I do believe that more research should focus on the exploitation as well. And then clearly companies always have to balance the two and work in tandem with the two. But I remember what an executive told me many years ago, that if a key account customer wants us to come up with a new customized solution, maybe buying uptime instead of products and spare parts, we can always come up with that. What's really challenging is to somehow industrialize this and provide advanced service to a wider range of customers. So I do think that for many companies, this is a key issue, and they are struggling with sort of being excellent in all these services in parallel, because there are clearly different approaches.
Just my thought might be, well, I totally agree with you, but might be industrialization of services something different than industrialization of goods. So yeah. That might be, so there might be specific challenges. That's what I think. Well, very interesting. So great.
Thank you so much. No, I fully agree. If we talk about industrialization, modularization, it is indeed different.
Thank you. We have also Thomas Witter. Did you raise your hand before, Thomas?
Yeah, it was before Michael started asking basically the same question. I agree with Christian bringing up the issue of productification, because we have much more interest in publications and servitization, but we have forgotten about the reverse thing, turning services into products. And I think there is a little difference between what I think productification is and how Christian defines it. But I fully support that this is an issue we need to invest much more time. It's a little bit that we have looked at ice melting to water, but we have never considered that the water may freeze back to ice, and that correction going forward as a research agenda is a very good idea.
That's a nice analogy. Thank you, Thomas. And yeah, thank you for that.
I would like to make a quick question, because I saw in one of your papers that you coined the term of de-servitization. It is something that is still in the mindset of the business practitioners, and how this relates to the performance paradox.
Oh yes, so I didn't mention it here in this paper because I was focusing on service, but deservitization is also, I believe, interesting to look at, and companies that sometimes they leave the service business, deciding to focus more on the product business, if you like. Or it could also be service companies that suddenly move into product business. I mean, you mentioned Google before here, Michelle, and I mean, Google didn't start making products, but you have the Google phone, you have intelligent speakers, and so on. So you have products as platforms for service provision. But it may also be manufacturers that try to move into service, but may fail and decide, let's sell this rental business. Or now we start to compete with our customers or with powerful intermediaries. So, and we don't want to have this channel conflict. We are unable to handle it. So we leave the service business. We decide to keep focusing on the products. In some cases, it's a result of a failure. In some cases, it may be a very wise decision, because in some markets, I mean, there is almost like an oligopoly, a very little competition on the product side. So why compete and try to build up a people business that may be very resource demanding? You may be in a very good position to just focus on the products, of course, adding digital technology and other features. So I would say it all depends, but deservitization is indeed an interesting area. Another one, just if I may add, I had a special issue 5 years ago on servitization, and one of the themes we asked for was, well, acquisition strategies, because a lot of this we think about, well, service as organic growth, but we know that companies all the time, they buy and they sell companies, and they also extend their service business through acquisition or mergers. And we didn't receive a single paper on that topic. This is clearly an under-researched topic, how companies can acquire companies for service growth. It could be specialized service providers, software firms these days, but maybe also product firms that have a large installed base that is not being serviced properly. And other companies may be more visionary and see that it's a huge installed base. If we have it, we can sell a lot of services that are currently not existing.
Thank you so much. Any other question, please?
Yeah, if I can add, hi, Jose.
Hi, Christina, good to see you.
Hi, Christina, good seeing you again.
Yeah, really interesting and insightful. And I think that the servitization perspective is really important also in one of the area you mentioned, that is the AI and the robots, because in my research, one of the main reasons of the failures of the service and social robots is that there is a product-oriented mindset, so to develop and sell to other customers in a B2B setting as a product. Instead, it should be seen as a service. And it is important to develop a service-oriented view to better understand what can be the value news of this new technology.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I fully agree. It's very easy to be carried away with all the technological opportunities, especially if you're an engineering-based company, and to provide something without having a clear value proposition or business model in mind, without sort of thinking about all the service potential this entails.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We are running out of time because we normally give a break before the session. Any final question or comment?
Yeah, I just want to comment that I agree with you. I think this changes a lot when you look at the B2B research, which has primarily been product-centric. And I know I did some early research on the buying center regarding products and services, and the buying center is dramatically different. The buying center for services turned out to be smaller, and very rarely was purchasing involved. And some more recent research on the value of brands, and for products, the value of a brand is high when the product is either very important or not important. And products of moderate importance, where you can test them and do due diligence and things with the physical product, the brand is less important. But I would think that would reverse for services, that moderate services, the brand's going to be important as well. And if you look at consulting companies as an example, consulting companies, even for moderate levels of service, the brand's very important. So I think you're right on with that. There's so many things that we're going to have to research regarding what we know about business to business marketing as we get more and more into services.
That's a great comment, Wes. Thanks a lot. I fully agree. That's really interesting with the different types of offerings.
And we haven't known how to price services very well, but I think your research could lead to better pricing of services as well. If you look at large consulting companies that do moderate service projects, they charge a fortune compared to the smaller consulting companies. I think prices could change dramatically for services as well.
Mm-hmm. That's certainly true, yes.
Thank you so much, Christian, for the wonderful presentation.